Hey everyone, welcome to the 395th episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have a bunch to talk about this week, mostly about consumer IoT. But you'll want to stay for it because we're all going to have consumer IoT one day, right? So first up, we're going to be talking about the proposed cybersecurity label from the White House, giving a little bit more detail and context to that effort. We're also going to be talking about IKEA's latest hub, the Digera. We think it's called that.
Dirigera.
Dirigera. Is it better than Trod-free? We'll tell you later. And Samsung has allowed us to update our SmartThings hubs to Matter. I'll explain what I did and how that's working. Google has a bunch of news and things coming down the pike that they said were going to come down, and here they are. We're going to use some of them and talk about why some of them will work and won't work. There's a rumor that Ecobee is going to launch a video doorbell, which confuses us. We've got a new LoRaWAN gateway DeFi concept we'll talk about, and we'll talk about Level Lock being sold at the Apple Store and other HomeKey supported locks out there. And finally, one of my favorite devices, it's dying, and I'll explain what it is and what that means for anyone who bought it. We'll also hear from our sponsor, ARM, later on in the show, and our guest this week is Mike Nelson, the VP of IoT Security at DigiCert. We're going to be talking about Matter, the cybersecurity label, and more. All of this and more awaits you. But first, a message from another one of our sponsors. This week's sponsor is Silicon Labs. Silicon Labs is a leader in secure, intelligent wireless technology for a more connected world. Their integrated hardware and software platform, intuitive development tools, and robust support make them an ideal long-term partner in building advanced industrial, commercial, home, and life applications. Silicon Labs makes it easy for developers to solve complex wireless challenges throughout the product lifecycle and get to market quickly with innovative solutions that transform industries, grow economies, and improve lives. Learn more at scilabs.com. Okay, first up, Kevin. We have got the cybersecurity label. We'll enter into this story with a little bit of news. There was a BlackBerry survey. Who knew that BlackBerry Cyber IoT device labeling survey was even a thing? But it is. Yeah.
They're still doing things.
Yeah. So they put out a survey saying that fewer than 10% of U.S. adults said they believe robot vacuums, smart refrigerators, smart purifiers, smart ovens, pet cameras, and autonomous vehicles are safe from cyber threats. Only 1 in 5 adults thought smart speakers were safe from cyber threats.
And that's the safest out of the bunch, by the way.
Yeah, and that's the safest. And 80% of adults said a cybersecurity star rating system would make them feel safer while using an internet-connected device. So we talk about IoT device security all the time on this show because it is really important, and most of us don't want to think about it. And I get it because it's hard. It's hard for a couple reasons. One, we want these things to be cheap. 2, different devices require different levels of security. Your oven that has the potential to blow up your home needs a much higher level of cybersecurity than, I don't know, a light bulb.
I'm unplugging my oven now that you've said that.
My oven is connected.
Yes, so is mine. That's why I'm unplugging it.
Oh, I have 2 connected ovens. Yeah, so that's one reason it's hard. So that's like a stars thing sounds great, but you may not need 5 stars on a light bulb, but that's going to be hard to explain to consumers.
True.
So the thinking was, let's do a cybersecurity label. And the White House has really kind of come around to this idea. They met last Wednesday, and by they, I mean the White House Cybersecurity Director, Jessica Rosenworcel from the FCC was there. Folks from the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, were also there. And presentations were given by the CTA, which is the organization that puts on CES, the CSA, which is the organization that has Matter, Carnegie Mellon's Scilabs, which is the organization that created a security label way back in like 2013 or 2014, and the IOXT Alliance, which we're not huge fans of here because honestly, they started out with devices. They went more towards apps. Now it's apps and devices. It's a little weak in the fact that you can self-certify and that even big vendors like Roku is actually self-certified under this. And I feel like as a standard goes, I would like it to be a bit more rigorous. That's just it.
It does kind of diminish the value when you can self-certify like that.
And I think self-certification is really important. If you are a tiny company, it is hard to go through a big certification process, right? You don't know if you're going to succeed or not. But if you have self-certification and big companies are availing themselves of it, that leads me to question it tremendously. Yep. I felt like I had to clarify that because that is,
You're just cranky because we didn't get invited to the thing last week at the White House, but that's all right.
That's okay. I probably wouldn't have gone. It's very far.
Oh, well.
No, it's not that. Okay. Anyway, so I wrote a story in the newsletter, and we will link to that in the podcast notes. But it's worth mentioning that upon further talking to people, so in the newsletter, I talked about, I spent a lot of time on Carnegie Mellon's label because I like it. I think it's too complicated, but I also really wanted the White House to focus not just on cybersecurity, but also on privacy. It really sounds like privacy is no longer on the table, talking to people within the government. And that is really unfortunate. That being said, they are very serious about a cybersecurity label. The question is more like, what is that label going to require? Is it going to be mandatory, like every device must have it? Or is it going to be voluntary where, you can apply for this label or not? And what organization is going to oversee it? So those are some of the big questions, and those are big questions, but they really want to have this out by spring of 2023, which is very soon.
What sensors are used? What data is collected by those sensors? Where it is stored?
So that is not going to happen.
What? Why?
Yeah, so that's the privacy side. Labeling of sensors and saying, hey, this device has this sensor. It collects this information. That data gets stored for X amount of time and is shared with these people. And do we sell it or not? All of that is not going to be, that's privacy.
So what will be there?
We talked about this and we'll talk about it again later on in the show, but Matter requires things like device level encryption. It requires device attestation. So all of that is supposed to be part of it. So when we talk about cybersecurity, we're basically talking about like, hey, when this device joins the network, do we have a way of making sure that it is actually secured and attested under this label? Yes or no? Great. It's secure. Does it use on-device level encryption? Yes. Maybe it'll extend to cloud-based encryption, but we don't know. And does it have a way to update the software securely? Yes or no? So those are things that look to be most likely to be part of this. The privacy stuff is the stuff I'm most excited about because I think it's the most important and the most opaque to consumers. I think when if a device vendor suddenly turns on a sensor and you don't know that it's there, or someone exploits a device and they have sensors like cameras and they can access your home, that privacy thing becomes an actual security thing. And I also think data, like pulling data off of these devices and sharing it so widely is also a security threat to consumers because people can tell like if you're home or not. They can make inferences about, if you have a kid and if someone wants to kidnap that kid. I mean, these are things that people, like everyday consumers, they tend to look at both security and privacy. They recognize intellectually they're different, but they kind of look at the effects of violations of both as the same thing. Yes.
They often get lumped together. There's a kind of belief that they're one and the same. And while they're obviously highly
correlated.
I was looking for the right word. Thank you. They're not the same thing. That's why I'm really disappointed to see half of this missing in what appears to be coming.
Yes. I just wanted to just drive that home to y'all because it is disappointing. And I knew the Carnegie Mellon label would not fly because, there are 47 points. That's way too complicated. Oh my gosh. But I, as a person, love it. What you're likely to see is an Energy Star style label. Energy Star is the program created by the EPA. You stick it on devices that use the appropriate amounts of energy. If you buy an Energy Star refrigerator, you know it's going to fit within EPA parameters for Energy Star appliances. You don't care what those are. You're just like, oh, it's better than one that doesn't have it. And that's kind of what they're looking for here. So sad. Okay. Speaking of things that are complicated, Let's talk about Matter, because the next flux of stories are all basically getting ready for Matter.
Which is good. I mean, at first we were like, oh, all this stuff is coming. We can't really use it quite yet. But like, now is the time to be excited. This is the prep before the big tsunami of Matter stuff comes, I think.
Nobody wants to be in the way of a tsunami, though.
I like tsunamis.
This is getting all your boxes down before the holidays, either Halloween, Christmas, whatever. You're getting all your decor down. It's kind of a pain, but at the end, you're going to throw it all up there and it's going to be amazing.
It's all worth it in the end.
So here we go. First up is IKEA. They have their new Dirigira hub and their new IKEA Home Smart app are all going to be available sometime in this week or next week, depending on where you are. You've got to check your local IKEA. But they're out now, is the idea. So the Dirigira hub is going to be compatible with Matter. It is not yet compatible with Matter. So you're going to buy it and they're going to update it, quote unquote, eventually. And Kevin points out the new Dirigira name means conducted. So
conducting.
Conducting. Sorry.
Yeah. It's Swedish, yes.
It's conducting all of the orchestration of your smart home. This is a replacement for Trod-free. So if you're like me and you have a Trod-free hub running around your home, you're going to have to move everything over. That process was not terribly difficult based on the Verge review. I don't have one, so I will see. And I actually can't wait to use the IKEA Home Smart app because it looks really nice. It looks like they're using some haptic feedback, and the Verge says that their Dirigira setup was more responsive than Trod-free, but they hadn't operated the Trod-free for a while, so who knows?
They had some connectivity issues with the Trod-free that don't seem to be happening with the new hub.
Yeah, the original Trod-free had some weird things about getting your devices on board. I remember it being less awesome. The Dirigira will not support IFT, which is notable if you're using IFT. I don't know how many people out there still are. Actually, I do, because I talked to IFT a couple weeks back and they told me. Surprisingly, they're making money, believe it or not, on their subscription. I actually pay IFT, so I'm not that surprised. Okay, back to IKEA. It's going to support integrations with Amazon, Google, and Apple, but if you've got Matter, it's going to support all of that anyway. They're one day going to allow for a Wi-Fi connection, not just the Ethernet. Today, you have to have it next to a switch and a modem, or a switch and a router. I guess if your router has multiple ports that are free, you don't need the switch, but you got it. That is the IKEA hub, and that is good news. We'll hopefully get one of these in the next couple of weeks and try it. Next up is Samsung. So Samsung has actually updated its SmartThings hubs and its AOTech hub, that is the latest version of the hub that runs SmartThings, and the SmartThings app, all to run Matter. And this would be way more exciting if there were actually Matter devices to test.
Yeah. But getting back to the Christmas theme, this is, wrapping the presents before you put them under the tree.
Oh, I'm still this is like the nasty part where you're up in the tree with the ladder and you're stringing the lights around it and it's cold and wet. And you're like, oh, why am I decorating for Christmas? So yeah. I updated my SmartThings hub to Matter.
Which hub do you have, by the way?
I have the AOTech hub.
Okay. And the reason I say that is because they say that the Matter controller support for SmartThings starts with the second and third gen of the SmartThings hub. So if you get a really old SmartThings hub, I don't know what to tell you there.
Yeah, that's the original one. I actually used to have that one. The SmartThings hub was actually the first smart home device. Actually, the Wemo outlets were the first smart home device, but from a hub, SmartThings was it. And it was awesome. It was back in 2013. Oh.
That was before it was SmartThings, wasn't it?
No, it was always SmartThings, but it was before it was Samsung.
Before it was Samsung, that's right.
Remember back in the day, I was testing so many smart hubs.
Yes,
so
I
many.
do.
Quirky. Well, that was the Wink. So Quirky Wink. Then there was Revolve, and Google bought that and shut it down. And I'm trying to think. Oh, there was the Zonoff one that was owned by Staples. Oh my gosh.
So many hubs, so little time.
So back to Matter. So because there's not a lot to test it with, I will tell you, the second I updated, I had the SmartThings hub on my network running a couple test devices because I was testing the app because they've done a lot with it. They eliminated the Groovy programming language, and I was going to do a big overarching review, and then I kept putting it off because they kept changing things. Once I did update to Matter, I will say that I noticed something broke. I shut everything down. I reset the device. And what happened was I let it automatically detect devices. It only detected my Wemo devices, which makes sense, but it broke those. So they're set to go on at 8 a.m. And for some reason, the day after I updated to Matter and everything started working, they popped on at 6 a.m. And I looked, and the Wemo, that stayed the same. The rules I had on the Wemo setting was the same. The SmartThings Hub doesn't have any rules associated, or didn't have any rules associated with the Wemo devices. So that was strange. And it's also in my time zone, because one of the reasons I did the reset is because sometimes anything that I've moved over from living in Austin to here has a time zone issue sometimes. But I couldn't figure out what was happening. So we're just going to associate that with the ghost. We'll see if it happens tomorrow.
Well, I'm going to throw a thought out, and it may be a bad thought. Maybe I may be off on this, but it shouldn't have anything to do with the multi-admin stuff, but I wonder.
Literally nowhere else in my house does it have it saying to come on at 6. And my Google devices are the only other things, but they're not met. Anyway, the point is there are ghosts already in my network, and I'm already like, oh my God, if my lights are coming on at 6 a.m, my family is going to kill me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm up in the tree. I'm hanging the lights. It's cold. It's windy. Once we get some Matter devices, I can test. I can see that I can add my Matter devices in the SmartThings app now in a multitude of ways.
And they should go automatically at some point to your Google Home app as well once you onboard them.
Yes. So I can either scan a QR code, which we've talked about forever. I can scan for devices on Wi-Fi and Bluetooth that are ready to connect, or I can enter a setup code, and that's for Matter devices only. I could also just select from a list of devices. So
find your device here.
Exactly.
You know what's interesting? I don't know why this is, but the press release on this says that the SmartThings hubs will get an over-the-air update, which obviously you got, and the SmartThings Android app will be updated to provide capability to control all Matter-compatible devices. There's no mention of iOS. And there is a SmartThings for iOS. I'm just looking at it. It's got 68,000 reviews on the App Store. That's interesting. I don't know why you would do one and not the other at the same time, but...
Well, iOS is going to be updated to Matter. 16.1 had Matter capabilities, so maybe it's...
They don't need to? I don't know.
All right. Well, Kevin, you're on that as our resident iOS person.
I'm on it.
You may have to run the SmartThings app for a hot second. So sorry. It's actually much better. It's nice. Okay, let's talk about Google. Basic stuff that you should be excited with is, we knew this was coming. They talked about it a couple weeks ago, the new Google Home app. As part of that, they were going to bring in a bunch of new capabilities. A couple of them are already showing up. So you now can use your Google Home web app. You now can see your Nest cameras on it. And so that's really exciting for anybody who's got a bunch of Nest or even older Google Home cameras. You can all pull them into one view on the web. Next up is Google has said that the Google Home app will work with older Nest cameras next year. So one of the issues with the Google Home app is when they killed the Nest app, well, they didn't kill it, but deprecated the Nest app, people were mad because they didn't want to go to the Google Home app because their cameras were not supported. In the way they had been used to seeing them. So you couldn't use live view, you couldn't see a lot of things, but all of that is now coming to the Google Home app. The latest Google cameras actually have that functionality already, and the older ones are coming next year is what Google said.
Yeah, they've said that the Nest Cam IQ and Nest Cam Indoor are coming next year to the Google Home app. So if you have those, you're good.
Also, you might notice that Google Assistant on your speakers and that sort of thing is going to get a little bit better and more aware of context. Like, oh, you're in this room. If you say turn on the lights, it's probably going to say, okay, and it'll turn on the lamp in the room that you're in. It's because it's updating its AI. So
you might not know the exact name of a device, or maybe somebody else in your house doesn't know the exact name of a device, but if they're kind of close. Google's AI can now, as I read it, kind of infer which device you're talking about. So, I have a front porch light, for example, and that's what I say, but maybe my wife would say, turn on the front light. And Google would be like, oh, well, it's probably the front porch light. Boom, and it'll turn it on. So better AI, which is good. Makes the whole experience a little more universal.
Yeah, and I'm hoping it'll address my issue. So I have a robot vacuum cleaner, a Roomba. Its name is Terrence. And when I tell Google, hey, G, tell Terrence to vacuum the master bedroom, it'll do it. But if I say, ask Terrence to vacuum the master bedroom, Google's like, I don't know what you're talking about, which drives me nuts because I tend to not tell people things. I tend to ask them. Maybe
Terrence set a rule that says I'm not taking any requests.
Oh, that's true. Terrence. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so that should solve that little niggling issue for me. I'm excited. I don't have this. I haven't seen this yet. I did ask Terrence last night to vacuum, and I told him, rather, as opposed to asking.
Yes. Do it, Terrence. So now apparently you can specify rooms. In fact, Google gives an example of have the vacuum clean the kitchen, living room, and dining room, which again, I think would be, well, it wouldn't be part of Matter because robotic vacuums are not part of Matter. But Google itself has figured it out, yeah.
You have to name your rooms. Like in the Roomba setting, for example, I have named all of my rooms. I tried to keep all of my room, as a general rule, I try to keep consistent room names throughout every single one of my smart home platforms, because otherwise it's a freaking nightmare. I don't think I would have had this issue, but it's possible, and you have to actually set up those inside the Roomba app for Google to recognize it, believe it or not. Google doesn't automatically know that, because Google doesn't see what the Roomba knows is your kitchen.
Right.
So anyway, moving right along. Also, and this is something we are all super excited about here in the super nerdy automation smart home world, the Google Home app is going to allow for more complicated routines as part of Matter. But we're already seeing this today. So now you can create more complicated routines that are set off by devices inside the Google Home app.
Yay!
You can only do this. Well, actually, I think you can do it for personal routines, but
yeah, I think you can, but I wouldn't, because the difference is there's now two types of routines, and we see both Stacey and I saw this in our Google Home app today, so you probably will as well if you've updated recently. You have personal routines, which only you can edit and view. So those might be things that have personal data, like, read out my calendar events today or something like that. But then you also have household routines so that anybody who's a member of your home can create or edit those routines. And this is part of the whole using a device as a trigger event, essentially.
This is basically like putting IFT inside your home, but it's worth noting that you're going to be able to do some things and not others. So we're going to talk about some of the things you can't do, because I feel like y'all are smart. Y'all will come up with all sorts of crazy things that you want to do. So anything tied to a personal routine will not be available to you. If you have multiple media actions, that's not going to be available to you. You can only add one media action for each routine, and things that affect your safety or security. So unlock isn't available as a starter, but you can set lock as an action, right? So you can't have an unlock start anything. I imagine the same thing will also go for things like garage door opening and closing as well.
See, that's kind of weird to me, because I don't see my security compromised if that's the trigger event, or what Google is now calling a starter. If I unlock my door, I've unlocked my door. Obviously, I'm not having that become the action taken based on a routine. It's the starter event. So if I unlock my door and come home at night, why can't I trigger lights and things like that? It seems kind of weird to me.
It's true. And I actually used to have a routine in my old house when our garage door opened. So similar idea. When our garage door opened, it would unlock the garage side door and turn on our porch lights. So those two things happened. I couldn't do that here, but I get why. So the other reasons you might not have a starter available to you, like things like sunset or when someone leaves the house, are potential starters. You have to have an address for your home. So if you don't have that, you could only select one non-voice starter for each routine. So you can't have like, when this motion trigger is triggered and this light goes on. That's a non-starter starter.
That's a non-starter, yes.
And you have to have a device that is supported. That feels pretty obvious.
Yes.
And if you want a routine that starts when people are home or away, you have to first set up your home and away routines. So,
yeah.
Ta-da.
There's one thing I really don't like about this. I'm actually happy with most of it. The fact that the routines still take place on a Google device, meaning they're going to show up on a screen or they're going to be spoken aloud from a speaker. And I just don't feel I need that.
Oh, like once the routine engages, Google's going to talk to you about it?
Yes.
Yes, I hate that.
I hate that too.
I'm like, Google, please stop talking. I wish Google would create a brief mode like they have for Amazon. What's odd, though, is sometimes my Google is brief and sometimes it's not. And I cannot for the life of me figure out why.
They're always doing A/B testing, so.
Yeah, who knows? Okay. In smaller news bits, Ecobee is rating a video doorbell, according to That's Not Funny, which actually they're pretty good at this. So,
why are they doing this?
I don't know. Ecobee launched the Haven security system, and it was like then they could have recurring revenue in addition to like selling you air filters. But I really just don't understand this at all.
It doesn't make any sense to me for them to try and add this product. I don't know what value it brings to the Ecobee ecosystem.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, more hardware sales, but whatever, but that's just not their wheelhouse.
Yeah, and after it's been purchased by Generac, which is a generator maker, I was like, oh, it makes so much sense. They're going all in on this smart energy management thing, which admittedly is a couple years away from mainstream, but still really important. So yeah, I just don't know why we need another video doorbell. Possibly because everyone will need their own video doorbell and video camera ecosystem until Matter supports it. So maybe that's it, but it just is weird. Moving right along. Oh, Kevin, you talk about this.
Oh boy. Yeah, I know. There's yet another LoRa product, a decentralized, this time dual band gateway. It doubles as a miner for all you crypto peeps. It is from Chirp. I don't know what to say about this other than...
We've been here before and we were burned by helium.
Right. They're touting, LoRaWAN range of over 100 kilometers with just 5 watts of power. And
I mean, the idea here is that it's going to be both a LoRaWAN network for your home and devices that use LoRa, and you can also share it with other people.
If you're interested, there's a wait list to join and get a miner. I don't know how much it's going to cost or anything else yet, but this was just announced.
Just to create your own LoRaWAN network. Other news, Level Lock. People notice that the Level Lock, which is a pretty differentiated lock in the sense that it is not like a turner.
It's a deadbolt.
It's a deadbolt. It's a smart deadbolt that is self-contained and it is designed to be smart, which means the deadbolt itself, the batteries, it doesn't have a big battery pack. It looks like today's deadbolt, but it's actually smart. It's now sold in the Apple Store. People are very excited. It works with HomeKey. It is one of a few locks that work with HomeKey, and Kevin will tell you why HomeKey is so great.
I actually do love it. I had tested the Schlage Encode Plus, which that goes back about 4 months or so at least that I tested that, and it's still very hard to find. However, we did find a few colors available. I couldn't find it in the satin nickel, but I did find it in aged bronze for $320 at some Home Depots. It's still hard to find though. However, yes, I love it because if you have an Apple Watch or an iPhone, you can just use the NFC radio inside that device, hold it next to the lock, and it unlocks once you've set that up. And my whole family loves it. It does have a keypad, and it's there. It's a nice backup in case you leave the house.
That is the Schlage lock that has a keypad.
That is the Schlage lock, yes. It does have a keypad, so you can have guests come in and Android people and whatnot. And we love it. It's $319. Now, the Level Lock doesn't have a keypad, does use Bluetooth still, I believe, and now NFC for HomeKey. So you get that same functionality with an iPhone or an Apple Watch. It's $329.99. I mean, these are not cheap locks.
No, Level has never been cheap. And I will add that Level is supporting Amazon's Sidewalk, Just throwing that out there is another possibility. So it's going to support it over Bluetooth. So the idea being that you can use the sidewalk connection if for some reason everything fails, you can still unlock your door. Anyway, if you're into the home key lock, or if you're all in on the Apple ecosystem, this may be for you, but like anything in the Apple ecosystem, it is expensive. Okay, let's talk about the end of one of my favorite all-time devices. Mournful sounds. Okay, the Aware Glow, Glow C, and the Aware V1, they're not going to get firmware updates after November 30th, 2022. They're sunsetting it because they have a bunch of other devices that they want to support, basically.
Yeah. How long have you had that thing? It's got to be at least 4 or 5 years. Yeah,
I bought it when I lived in Austin, and so we left that in 2019. So yeah, okay, I've had it for a while. Probably, I think I might have bought it in 2018 or 2017. So yes, but it still works. They're just killing it because they don't want to support it anymore. So here's what's going to break. So they're going to basically logging into the app using Google Sign-In is going to break. All the integrations with IFT, Google Home, Ecobee, Sensi, and SmartThings are going to break. My Amazon Madam A in-app controls will break, but I can still talk to it via Madam A. And the push notification system. So I will no longer get push notifications saying, hey, your air quality sucks. I'm just going to have to walk by it and see if my little light on the top is not working. And I will be able to still see, if I go into the app, the actual air quality. But I'm sad because there's no other device out there that really replicates the feature set of the Glow and the Glow C, which was that it had an outlet that you could actually specify specific devices that it would control for you. It turned a dumb air purifier or dumb dehumidifier, which I have, into something that would smarter.
I'm going to throw you a bone here and say this might not be a permanent sunset, because they're saying they can't put their resources into fixing the following features, of which you all read just a second ago. So we will be temporarily removing them until a new version of the app is available for release.
I don't know, man. Why would... Fine. So now this device is gone, and it makes me sad because I told all of y'all how great it was, because I really did. I loved it.
Well, we never know how well or how long something will be supported. I mean, that's something only time will tell.
This is why I want expiration dates on devices. We've written about this as recently as 2021. So what if you went out and bought it then? It's for sale still. That would be terrible for you. And you would be rightly frustrated. So that is my take on this. Okay. Moving right along, I think it's time for that section of the show where we talk to you. That's right. It is the Internet of Things podcast hotline, where we take your calls and questions and answer them. The IoT podcast hotline is sponsored by Silicon Labs. Thanks, Silicon Labs. Silicon Labs' Wi-Fi portfolio is specially designed for the IoT, where multi-protocol, RF performance, ultra-low power consumption, and fast time to market are critical. You can learn more about Silicon Labs' low-power Wi-Fi hardware, software, tools, and dev kits at scilabs.com. Okay, if you would like to call us, you will be entered to win our prize for this month. Did we decide it was the lock?
It was going to be Matter Hub, and then we switched.
To a lock? I think it was a lock. We're going to send you my Yale...
That's it.
Gen 2 Assure lock. This is a review.
With the Wi-Fi module, I remember.
Yeah, with the Wi-Fi module, not the Matter module.
This is why we need an intern. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. This is... Fine. We've got Trello. We're okay. Okay, so that is what you will be entered to win every month. At the end of the month, we draw from all of our existing callers, and we pick one. So it could be you if you call us at 512-623-7424. And this week's question comes from Greg. And Greg lives near Kevin. Let's hear what he's got on his mind.
Hey, Stacy and Kevin. This is Greg Martin. I hail from Southeast Pennsylvania, near Kevin. I've been listening to your podcast for the better part of a year now, and appreciate all the good information. One of the things that we've heard a lot over the last couple of years about Matter is that it has security baked in. And I saw it repeated on probably in your Twitter stream this week, Stacey. And it occurred to me that I've never heard the how behind that. Maybe you could take a chance or take a stab at explaining that to us. Thanks. Appreciate all the information. Bye.
No, Greg, you might not get the newsletter, and that's okay. But I did write a big story all about the kind of security that Matter is going to offer. But I'm happy to run over it again because, like we said at the beginning of the show, security is super important. The big security features is that it requires over-the-air updates. It requires device-level encryption, not cloud encryption, and not device-to-cloud encryption, just device-to-device inside your LAN encryption. It also requires a secure enclave and some sort of certificate scheme. So companies that make these devices have to go to an audited and accepted root provider to get certificates. They can either go and get certificates or they can issue their own certificates. And those certificates are going to be what is on the device that communicates with other devices and says, hey, those certificates will be what is used when you onboard a device to reach up to the cloud and be like, hey, I'm this guy right here. And it's going to be like, oh, I see. I've got this. Okay. Yes, you are a legal Matter device. Welcome aboard to the network. That's called attestation. That's how that is handled. And that's so you know that only Matter devices are coming on and that the device that is labeled a Matter device is actually a Matter device, not some imposter.
That happens before. I mean, I know there has to be some check to the cloud, but that happens before the device can join your network. So It's not getting on your network until it's gone through the attestation process.
Exactly. And that's where that blockchain element comes in. All of that is stored in the blockchain, along with the current version of the software that your device is running. And so this is good for things like tracking over-the-air updates and vulnerabilities, right? And the other thing that it requires is code signing. So this is relatively niche, but basically it means that a developer can't change the code that's running on your device without basically saying, hey, I changed the code.
Right. It's not like you could, or a hacker or somebody could modify the code at that point because it wouldn't be signed by the actual developer.
Right. So those are all really good steps. And they're all part of Matter, and that's just going to be. And then later on in the show, you're going to hear from Mike Nelson of DigiCert, who participated in the Matter security settings or security standards committee. And he's going to talk about where Matter is going to go next with security. So y'all stay tuned for that because it's pretty good. So hopefully that helps you and you'll have a sense. And there are lots of things it doesn't do. So it doesn't require like regular audits. It doesn't actually require that a company do an over-the-air update for a vulnerability, which I'm kind of like, well,
it just has to have the capability to do it.
Yeah. And like I said, it doesn't have the encryption in the cloud or to the cloud, which, I mean, some other devices will have that regardless, which is great, but Matter doesn't require you to have that. It doesn't have anything about like multi-factor authentication in there. So there are things that, could be more robust, but that's where it's at.
It's a good start.
It is. And it is the first standard to actually have a security base layer that's not like a security standard, right? So I think that's important. Moving right along. If you have a question, you can give us a call at 512-623-7424, and we might answer it, but we will definitely add you to our monthly drawing. All right, that concludes this segment of the show, but please stay tuned for a message from our sponsor and our guest, Mike Nelson of DigiCert. This week's sponsor is ARM. Hey everyone, we are taking a quick break from the Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is ARM, and I have Kevin Ryan, Senior Director of IoT Go-to-Market and Ecosystem from ARM. So first up, what is ARM doing in the IoT?
ARM is focused sharply on empowering our partners in the software developer ecosystem to thrive and excel in unlocking the opportunities of the IoT. We are focusing our efforts on three key areas. Firstly, ARM has the largest computational footprint on the planet, and a huge portion of this is IoT and embedded. Our partners shipped over 29 billion ARM-based chips in 2021. Around 70% of these were designed for IoT and embedded. This computational footprint is extraordinarily capable and rapidly evolving to match the workloads of tomorrow. Secondly, we believe rapid innovative software development is key to the next phase of IoT. We are laser focused on enabling developers through offerings like ARM Virtual Hardware. And finally, we're committed to standardization initiatives driving the advancement of the IoT. These initiatives include PSA Certified, Project Cassini, and Project Centauri, as well as efforts like Matter.
And how are you accelerating software development with ARM Virtual Hardware?
ARM Virtual Hardware provides models of popular IoT development kits, ARM Cortex-M and A processors, and Corestone solutions in the cloud for developers to build and test software without the need for physical hardware. It allows device and application developers to scale IoT software development and accelerate product design by up to 2 years. We're working with companies across the ecosystem, such as AWS, Oracle, Raspberry Pi, and Kixo, to either bring their hardware into the platform or to integrate ARM Virtual Hardware into their platforms and services. We're also working with Matter to explore the integration of ARM Virtual Hardware into the core CI flows of the Matter CI/CD infrastructure. This will ensure product developers can instantly access a scalable virtual test environment that maps directly to the wide ecosystem of ARM-based computing platforms for IoT. Stay tuned for more developments in this area.
And what types of use cases are you seeing ARM Virtual Hardware being used for?
The first one is the ability to start developing software ahead of hardware availability. The second use case is continuous integration and testing in the cloud. Real hardware is difficult to scale. ARM Virtual Hardware allows developers to move testing to the cloud infrastructure, enabling quick scaling to hundreds or thousands of boards in minutes. The third use case is MLOps. With the increasing adoption of ML at the edge, the ability to estimate how fast an ML model would run on the device is critical. By integrating ARM Virtual Hardware with ML tools such as Kixo, we are empowering data scientists to iterate experiments with different network architectures and optimizations much more quickly compared to with real hardware.
Excellent. Where can our listeners go to find out more about ARM Virtual Hardware?
Simply visit arm.com/virtual-hardware or search ARM Virtual Hardware in your search engine.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Mike Nelson, the VP of IoT Security at DigiCert. Hello, Mike. How are you today?
I'm great, Stacey. It's good to be on with you. Thanks for having me.
I am really excited. I think this is the first time I've had you as a guest on the show. I know we did ads way back in the day, and we all appreciate that here in the audience and me.
Yeah.
But today we're here to talk about a lot of things, but security is the big one. I think it's really important when we talk about security in the IoT to acknowledge a couple things. One is it's getting better. We started out like in there was that whole Verizon fish tank hack even earlier, but we started out in like 2016 with Mirai, and everyone was like, holy cow, we have all these insecure devices out in the world and it's terrible. And since then, I really feel like the industry and the regulatory bodies have started to pay attention to this, and we've gotten a little bit better. We started seeing like secure enclaves. We started talking about it more. And during the pandemic, I feel like with the rise of ransomware, people are like, oh my gosh, this is so serious. We got to really do stuff. So I think the whole world is getting a little bit better, but am I optimistic? What is your take, having been in this for a really long time?
Yeah, it's kind of fun to think back through the history of evolution over the last 7 to 10 years. But yeah, I think 2016 was, to your point, a pivotal year. Mirai, there were some medical device hacks that scared everybody. And since then, I would say, yeah, things have gotten better. We certainly see more regulatory activity. I think manufacturers who fill their devices have either been exposed, they've been hacked. You see good mitigation efforts that have gone on to do that. But yeah, I would say in general, things have gotten better. We still have work to do, but there has certainly been improvement.
Let's talk about some of the improvements, and then we'll go into the work we still need to do. I feel, and you were involved in this, that Matter is actually a pretty significant improvement for smart home devices, especially because it's one of the first standards out there that really puts security as part of the certification effort. And you were deeply involved with that. So can you talk about the thinking on how that came to be and what this requires?
Yeah, I mean, I know how big of a fan of Matter that you are. So it's I think the industry, we should thank you for continuing to promote it and sticking with it. There's been a lot of work that's happened over the last 3 years to create the standard that was just released, Matter 1.0. And security is a big part of it, to your point. I always say there are 3 ways that you can accomplish security. Regulation can come in and heavy hand it. Industries can come together and collaborate to say, hey, we have a problem. We should work together to solve this. Or the third one is manufacturers can just act with integrity and do the right thing when they're building the device. We see progress in all of those, but Matter is a great example of the second one, right? An industry coming together. And the Connectivity Standard Alliance convened over 250 organizations to create this standard. And security and interoperability are really at the core. They want to make sure that devices work seamlessly for consumers, but also are secure and ensure that devices that are going to market can be trusted and consumers can have confidence that they're not bringing devices into their home that's going to cause them problems.
So what are some of the basic security parameters that Matter requires?
Yeah, so for those of us in the security field, they're not new approaches. These are security tried and true practices that work. Encryption of data, requiring only validated and trusted devices to be compliant. Doing things like requiring devices to be updated. Technology continually evolves and gets better. Security has to stay ahead of that. And so having updates and requiring devices to be updated is a way that you can continually evolve your security. And then also doing things to ensure integrity of the software that's running on the device. Oftentimes malware or other things can happen. Requiring things like code signing is a really important ingredient of successful security for connected devices. And Matter is requiring all of those. And so it's the first industry that's really coming out and saying, we're not going to have a low threshold. We're actually going to require manufacturers to do some legitimate security practices that are going to help improve the state of security for the entire industry.
And to be clear, the encryption is only locally. So this doesn't deal with any of the cloud elements. Where should we go next in terms of security with Matter?
Yeah. So, I mean, you highlight one of them, right? I mean, looking at data in its entirety on the device, in transit, in the cloud, making sure that all of those are addressed. DigiCert, we live in the PKI space. A good component of public key infrastructure is revocation. Matter is already talking about for the next release to have revocation as part of that. Revocation allows consumers, so device attestation certificates or DACs that are commonly known, are going to be distributed to every device that is Matter compliant. If something happens on that device or that device becomes compromised, revocation is an important component so that you can revoke that credential and reissue a new one, which then reestablishes trust on that device.
So it reestablishes trust, but we also have to make sure the device is fixed. So if it's compromised, you revoke the certificate and then you fix it and then you give it a new certificate?
Yeah, so the process of updating a device, you can then update and you can mitigate the security vulnerability that was present on that device. And renewing credentials are the way that you do that. And revocation and then renewal processes through the compliance ledger and the things that are happening there allow you to mitigate and then get credentials back to the device to establish trust.
Got it. Okay. So revocation, something they're working on. Are they working on cloud encryption?
Yeah, I mean, I know that they're talking about it. I mean, 1.0 was just released a couple of weeks ago, and so discussions have just begun. And so, we're a couple of weeks into discussion. I know there are a handful of security topics that are part of that. And I think the handling of data is so core to IoT and to IoT security that it should be there.
Yeah, I wouldn't be me if I weren't pushing y'all ahead on Matter. I can't help it. I'm like,
we appreciate that. Yeah.
This is nice. Let's keep going. Are there other elements that would be appropriate to include in the standard that y'all are talking about or thinking about, do you think?
So there are policies for auditing security practices. Companies like DigiCert who are submitting product attestation authorities or roots of trust are required to be compliant with the policies. The audits around that compliance, I think, is really important, and they have some. I think that they can strengthen those, but I think that they have a good entry point for that. And I know there's discussion already going on that topic as well.
Awesome. All right. I look forward to Matter 1.2 or maybe 2.0. I don't know. Tied to all of this is the White House this last week brought in a bunch of people from industry, from academia, from all over to talk about creating a cybersecurity label for IoT devices. And this is obviously something near and dear to my heart. I feel like we've talked about this forever. I know that the CSA was involved in terms of presenting and talking about what they've done with Matter. IOXT was another alliance that was involved, and so was the CTA, and then some researchers from Scilabs at Carnegie Mellon. And we've had them on the show too, talking about their cybersecurity label, which has like 47 separate points. It's a very exhaustive thing. It's pretty cool.
Yep.
I don't think that's going to become the actual label, but can you talk about what we'd like to see in something like this that would be valuable for securing IoT devices?
Yeah, so labeling is a really interesting challenge. Security labeling is a really interesting challenge. For those of us in this security field, we get so excited. We're like, yes, a security label. It's going to be so great. And everybody's going to now realize the importance of security. But in my opinion, it's not that easy. And the reason is because if you ask an average consumer about encryption, it stops right there. They're like, okay, handle my data confidentially, right? They don't understand the complexities of encryption. They don't understand encryption on the device, encryption of data in transit, the difference of encryption in the cloud. The understanding is limited. So while I get really excited about labeling, I also have to step back and say, how is this really going to improve the state of security? Are consumers really going to digest this and be like, all right, I'm going to buy this device instead of this device because it has secure updates? And I think some will, but I don't know that all of them will. I believe that consumers actually have the right to assume security of the devices they're purchasing. Like if I go into a hospital and my child gets hooked up to an infusion pump, I'm not turning to the doctor and saying, hey, does this use authentication and encryption? I just say, get my child the right treatment. And I'm trusting that what is going on in that hospital is secure. And I think consumers in all industries have the right to assume that devices are being manufactured in a secure way. And so that's my personal feeling, is that it should happen.
Can we make that assumption today when we go into hospitals, when our children are at school with our devices in our home?
Yeah, I think unfortunately the answer is it depends on what hospital you're going into. It depends on what device you're being hooked up to, right? I think hospitals are doing a very good job of trying to protect their devices, but a hospital is a hospital, and the one down the road might not be deploying the same security practice. And that's where government, so when I talk about the 3 pillars of responsibility, that's where government regulation can really help to drive that. Because if that's being driven by government, then consumers can say, well, devices that are on the shelf have to at least meet this standard, and that's a good thing. I think Matter is also doing a really good job with this, because the Matter logo, the seal that is going to be on devices, as a consumer, I believe consumers will come to recognize that logo represents interoperability, but it also represents trust. It doesn't say, hey, here are the 15 security practices and it lists them on the box. It just says, here's the logo. And you know that if that logo is on the device, that it's met a certain baseline requirement. And then if you want to go look at the CSA to understand what they've done, you can get that information.
So it sounds like you're promoting this idea of a simple logo. And so the cybersecurity labeling program, and the White House seems to be keen on this. They've talked about an Energy Star for cybersecurity. And the Energy Star, for those who don't necessarily pay attention to it, is a little sticker that's on your appliances that says that it complies with some EPA regulations about energy usage. It's greener, as it were. So my understanding so far of any labeling effort is that it would be voluntary, so it's not mandatory, that it would be something more simplistic than a full-on label. So what do you think the base parameters of that? Should it stop at what Matter's doing? Should it have additional components? I know people have talked about privacy as part of the components.
Yes, certainly privacy would be a great addition, but you get to a level of that with data confidentiality. So yeah, I think what Matter has done is a great starting point. I think if you add many things on top of that, it becomes overly complicated if you're communicating that to consumers. Now, there are security practices that can happen that Matter's requiring, but they're not actually communicating that to consumers, right? And so I do think it should be simple. I think a big security label is just hard for consumers to digest and comprehend.
That's fair. I tend to agree with you, although I do love digging into that. I'm like, oh, this is so nice.
But that's because you and I, we get it, right? We get into security. We understand those components and we're like, oh, that's really cool. But if I showed that to my mom, she'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yes, if I want people's eyes to glaze over at parties, all I have to do is say, let's talk about software bills of materials, y'all.
Yep.
Okay, so this should be out, hopefully, spring 2023. Does this move the needle? So let's pretend, now we've got Matter out there. That's great. We've got the cybersecurity label. We're fast forwarding to sometime late 2023. I feel pretty good about maybe consumer devices having this baseline. What about other areas like healthcare and factories?
Yep. There's work that needs to be done in those. We're seeing good progress right now in the green energy space, electric vehicles specifically. We've seen good movement in the cable industry. Cable Labs is an organization that has done great work to make sure that cable equipment and technology is secure. But I believe other industries need to follow, and healthcare is one. There are a couple things going on in that industry right now that are similar to Matter. It'll be interesting in the coming year to see kind of what takes hold and where manufacturers start participating.
Do any of these industries need that specter of regulatory enforcement to kind of get behind this, or do you think they can do it on their own?
Yeah, so I think regulation can come and say, look, devices need to have these things as part of them. And then industries can come in and figure out how to do that. Right? Thinking about the ecosystem, the connectivity challenges, the operating systems, the limitations of devices, doing encryption and security practices on a big piece of capital equipment like an imaging device in a hospital is way easier than on a sensor that's monitoring soil moisture on a farm, right? So industries, I think, are best at solving those problems for themselves, but regulation can certainly say you have to be doing updates. You have to be doing integrity. You have to be doing confidentiality of data. You have to be doing privacy to protect consumers. And so I think there is a role for regulation. I believe the best solutions come when industries come together like we've seen with Matter, and they actually solve the problem for themselves.
Yeah, I'd love to see the VA hospitals because they have they're operated by the government. I'd love to see them drive ahead on this and then thus influence the rest of the industry. All right. And let's talk about all of the old gear out there, because that's especially in medical, in manufacturing, even in SMBs, there's a lot of old equipment that's really insecure. What do we do about that? You physically can't secure it.
Yeah, so again, based on the device that you're looking at, the answer as to whether you can do something or not differs. There is legacy equipment up there, some that can be updated through remote updates, some that require a technician to go and update the device, or in a hospital could go and do some things that could introduce a level of security. May not be perfect, but could do some things to control. Legacy is a really big challenge. I know that in some industries, they've talked about, cash for clunkers or buyback programs to try to incentivize. You highlight devices that may have the most risk and vulnerabilities where patients or critical infrastructure is involved. But I'm just not seeing a lot of activity there. I think most of the discussions around legacy are, let's just let it run its course and hopefully nothing happens. And then the next device they're going to get is going to be more secure. I think, and we have seen organizations take a more proactive approach, going in and assessing what can be done. And we've seen great results. I've seen hospital systems that have actually done that and have been very proactive working with the manufacturer to improve security. And it can be done. It can't be done on all devices, but many devices you can implement a basic level of security that still brings better protection than what's there. So, I guess my suggestion would be not to just sit and assume nothing can be done. At least dig in, work with professionals who can help you make that assessment, and then if things can be done, to do it.
That's fair. Look around, see what's possibly broken, see if you can fix it. If you can't, isolate it, or at least know that it's out there and a potential risk. Okay. Well, Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show this week. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Stacy. It's great to be with you. And I always enjoy our discussions.
And that concludes this week's episode of the Internet of Things podcast. Please join us next Thursday and don't forget to subscribe. And if you can't get enough IoT news, I would love for you to sign up at www.stacyoniot.com for our weekly IoT newsletter, where we explain all kinds of things that we don't even get to on the show. Once again, thank you for listening and please subscribe.